I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk about leaked cables that the Daily Mail UK got their hands on. These are leaked cables from the UK ambassador to the United States, a Sir Kim Darroch. Let me know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Alexander.
I think you're pronouncing it
Okay.
exactly right.
Now, these cables were embarrassing, to say the least, because from what the Daily Mail is reporting, the UK ambassador in DC calls Trump inept, calls his presidency uniquely dysfunctional, says the presidency could end in complete disgrace, says that the White House is constantly plagued with infighting and knife fights, gunfights. He categorizes it as such. And he also shows that he buys into the entire Russiagate hoax. Really just bizarre stuff, disgraceful stuff, things very unbecoming of an ambassador and of a diplomat. Alexander, this is a news story that's breaking today. What's going on here?
Well, first of all, I think that's absolutely shocking story. It shows how incredibly anti-Trump the British diplomatic service and the British establishment are. I don't think that's going to be much of a surprise to people, but I think it's absolutely shocking that he should talk in this way. And it gives you a very good reason to understand why the British are getting America so wrong at the moment, because this is the man who is London's most important diplomat in Washington. He is occupying the single most important diplomatic post held by a professional diplomat in the entire British diplomatic system. I think the British ambassador to the UN, in theory, outranks him, but in practice, the ambassador to Washington is the single most important diplomat because the relationship between the US and Britain is so important to Britain. It's crucial. And yet this person is obviously incapable of keeping London properly informed about what is going on in the US. Because, as you correctly say, he's bought into every single scandalous story about Donald Trump and his administration and his White House. He's not doing anything that I would remotely call proper reporting and analysis. He's put all his skepticism to one side. He's letting his prejudices show in an incredibly dangerous way. And yet his seniors in the Foreign Office in London and presumably in the British cabinet, the British Conservative cabinet, are obviously content with all of this, which I find incredibly alarming as well. I mean, one would assume that a British Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt at present, Boris Johnson a few months ago, a little while ago, receiving all this nonsense, would be coming back and saying to their ambassador, hold on a minute. I mean, you're not, what are you telling me? I mean, this doesn't really add up. It doesn't actually, this is newspaper gossip. It's not real discussion. And of course, the fact that all this has been leaked in the way that it has been leaked and is now all over the newspapers is incredibly embarrassing. And the extent of the British government's embarrassment is shown by the fact that this news story, which is a very important news story, is being barely reported here in England. I mean, it's not receiving the sort of coverage outside the Daily Mail that it ought to be receiving. And Donald Trump will certainly be informed about all of this, and he will be absolutely furious. And in the run-up to Brexit, where Britain will need a good trade deal with the United States, he will be extremely angry.
Yeah, and this follows Trump's recent visit to the UK, where he was with the Queen, and for all intents and purposes, was a very successful trip to the UK. So I mean, this is a big gaffe on the part of the UK diplomatic corps, the Foreign Service. But Before we get into Alexander, the fact that no one really knows where the leak originated from and how the Daily Mail got these documents, let me read you some of the highlights from the Daily Mail's article. In the memo seen by the Mail on Sunday following an unprecedented leak, Sir Kim describes bitter conflicts with Trump's White House, verified by his own sources as, quote, knife fights, warns that Trump could have been indebted to, quote, dodgy Russians, claims that the president's economic policies could wreck the world trade system, says the scandal-hit presidency could crash and burn, quote, and that, quote, we could be at the beginning of a downward spiral that leads to disgrace and downfall, and finally, voices fears that Trump could still attack Iran. What do you make of these points by Sir Kim?
Well, apart from the very last one, where I think there may be some truth to it, it seems to me that what Sir Kim is doing is he's talking to his friends, his liberal friends, because they clearly are liberal talking points, in the Democratic Party, in Congress, in the media, and I can't help but believe this, also within the US intelligence community. I cannot believe that he's doing his actual job of talking to people within either the Trump White House or the senior officials, the really top officials within the State Department. I don't believe that Mike Pompeo, for example, is telling Sir Kim this kind of nonsense. So he's not doing his job. And I mean, that's an important point to make, because a diplomat is supposed to be properly informed about what is going on in another country, in the country he is sent to, and is supposed to keep his government properly informed of what is going on in that other country. He is also supposed to maintain a close and good relationship, as far as is possible, with the leaders of the government of the country to which he is posted to. You are, if I may say so, from a diplomatic family. You know this sort of thing better than me. None of this remotely approximates to diplomacy as I understand it. I mean, all the things you described to me are talking points that I could have got from reading the New York Times or the Washington Post or from watching CNN or MSNBC. I mean, I cannot believe that he's doing his job properly. And that is an extremely worrying thing. And I think it was on one of our lives recently, somebody asked us the question whether British diplomacy used to be good. And I replied truthfully that it used to be very good. And I also replied truthfully that it has become appalling. And here we see it. Here we see the example of it. I mean, this is appalling stuff. Now, I have to say, it is so bad that I cannot believe that there aren't going to be complaints coming from Washington to London. And I cannot believe that Sir Kim will remain in his position for very long. And we were discussing just before we started this program how these leaks came about. Because when you said that they were unprecedented, unprecedented is exactly what they are. I mean, diplomatic cables sent by the ambassador to his government are about as confidential documents in the world of diplomacy as it gets. I mean, again, as a member of a diplomatic family, you understand even better than me how great the security that is created around these sort of documents is. You understand the sacrosanctity of the so-called diplomatic bags, the courier services that exist between diplomats and their home governments. And I just wonder how it came about that these documents were leaked. Now, was he sending these documents by some kind of radio or telephone or service, or through some kind of internet or communication service? And was the US itself therefore leaking, breaking into all of these things and showing them perhaps to Donald Trump and passing them on to the Daily Mail? Or was it, as I have to say, I think is much more likely, someone in London who was becoming really concerned about these leaks and saying to himself or herself, well, with Brexit round the corner and with the need that we have to have an ambassador in Washington who will really believe in developing our relationship with Washington as closely as possible. We do not want Sir Kim there, and whether these memos were leaked in order to get him shunted out of the way. Of course, there is the third possibility, which is that these were leaked by someone in Britain who wants to further discredit Donald Trump in advance of all of the documents that we know Donald Trump has ordered to be declassified as part of the investigations into the investigators of the Russiagate hoax, and whether this isn't an attempt by someone in London to get their shot in first by trying to establish even more definitively in the public mind what a terrible person Donald Trump is by appearing to lend credence to all these fantastic stories which have been circulating about him.
What about the scenario that this is the EU that is leaking these cables somehow, some way, that it's the EU behind it? We've done a lot of videos where we've documented, for example, with Corbyn.
Yes.
And how you have Tony Blair and a lot of EU forces that are behind trying to derail and dismantle Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes.
What about the possibility? We know that Kim was very pro-EU. He's a Europhile. Very pro-EU, elitist, globalist to the core. Well, so what about... Yeah?
I mean, this comes out very clearly in his cables. I mean, he, as I said, they're all neoliberal talking points.
Right. So what about the scenario that it's the EU trying to sabotage, a U.S.-UK trade deal or potential U.S.-UK trade deal by upsetting Trump, and therefore once again showing to the rest of Europe, is how I'm trying to make sense of this, showing to the rest of Europe that, look, don't take the route of Brexit because there are no other friends outside of, the member states that are going to want to do business with you.
I think it's a distinct possibility. The only qualification I would make is that it might not be the EU bureaucracy.
Right.
It might be the very, very passionate
Remainers.
The Remainers within the British Foreign Office and the British establishment. And may I as well say that, the British Foreign Office, virtually everybody who works there is a committed Remainer, as, of course, the British Civil Services.
Right. You've made that point. You've made that point many times, and it's sticking with me where you said the civil service is very, very much pro-EU. So this had to have been leaked somewhere in the chain of distribution where someone in the civil service must have said, okay, give this to the Daily Mail.
Well, indeed. Now, all I would say about that is if it is true, and it is a distinct possibility, it's a perfectly plausible theory, then all I would say is it shows how desperate the Remainers are becoming and how they are prepared to upset even the most sacred tenets of government and diplomacy in order to achieve their objective, which is to keep Britain in the EU. Because again, I come back to what I said. You come from a diplomatic family. You know how important and confidential the reports sent by an ambassador to his home government are. I have to say this, Alex, in all my time of following British foreign policy in action, I've never known anything like this to happen before. I've never known a situation where, as I said, we're reading comments like this reported to London by a serving British ambassador, and not just any British ambassador, but the British ambassador in Washington. That is unbelievable to me.
Yeah, this sounds like it's a setup. I mean, it sounds to me like there's some Trump derangement syndrome going
Yeah.
on here, and there's some people who are staunch Remainers who are looking to cause some sort of disruption and some sort of disarray between the UK, the US, and the whole Brexit process before October 31st. I don't know. That's my gut feeling as to what's going on, because this is about embarrassing Trump.
Yeah.
This is about humiliating the United States. This is about, it's just something just doesn't feel right about how this was done and given to the Daily Mail in such a secretive fashion.
Well, what argues in favor of what you're saying, Alex, is this. I mean, this isn't going to really harm Trump in any material way, because Trump's electoral base doesn't care what the British ambassador thinks and says about him. In fact, to the extent that they do care, it will make them more pro-Trump than anti-Trump, because a lot of those people, let's face it, are not very sympathetic to Britain anyway. I mean, at least not to the present British establishment. So it's not going to damage Trump in any significant way. The country that risks being damaged as a result of this is Britain, because if Brexit happens, Britain needs trade agreements with countries like the US. In fact, first and foremost, the US. So it does rather look as if someone is trying to burn that particular bridge in order to block a line of retreat away from the EU. I mean, that seems the most plausible explanation of all out of this very bizarre affair.
Finally, Alexander, how do you think the U.S. is going to respond? You said that most likely Kim is going to be removed from his post. Do you think this is just going to be, subdued and kind of, quietly dealt with?
I don't think it's going to be anything quiet behind. What I think is going to happen is that there will be a lot of angry telephone calls from Washington to London. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Donald Trump is on the phone to Theresa May about this. I mean, let's be very clear about this. Once upon a time, these sort of comments in diplomatic cables could have started a war between countries. I mean, this is off the scale. I think there will be people in Washington, not just Donald Trump, by the way, who will be incandescent at reading all of this stuff. And I think there will be many angry calls. And I think at a time when the US is already warning the British that if they continue along the lines that they're going with Huawei, for example, they risk jeopardizing their intelligence relationship with the US, there will be more threats of this sort. I think what will happen is, at the very least, the US will insist upon this particular ambassador being recalled. Where I think you may be right is that I think that the British will want to keep this very quiet. As I said, it's not being widely reported here in London. And I think that overall, and probably, you will see the British heavily lobbying the US by saying to the US, yes, we accept that Sir Kim has stepped far out of line. He's definitely coming back to London. We absolutely and completely apologize about this. We assure you that whoever is sent to London will not behave in the same way again, to Washington, will not behave in this sort of way again. But please, please don't make it public.
Okay.
That's what I think.
All right. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of Duran, thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on that subscribe button down below. Click on the notifications bell to make sure you get notifications every time we push out a new video. Hit that like button. Share the channel outside of YouTube. It really helps us to reach a new audience, because YouTube does not really help us get to new viewers within the platform. So share this channel on Gab, on Minds, Facebook, Twitter. You can also find us on BitChute as well, the Duran. Look for us there. What else? SoundCloud. You can get an audio copy of this video on iTunes and on SoundCloud. So check us out there as well. Go to theduran.com, our website. You can read all the articles that we are publishing. And, of course, Duran Shop. Alexander, the Oracle of London, is not in London. He's in
No,
a hidden location for the weekend, but he
well,
takes his mugs
oh,
with him.
absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't be without my mugs. Now, I'm afraid, as I'm not in London, I'm not able to drink from my various extensive tea collection because they're not available here. But I am nonetheless having excellent British breakfast teas out of my mug here, and of course coffee. And this, as I've said many times, is a beautiful mug with our Duran symbols there, the double-headed eagle covering east and west, uh, uh, showing everything that's happening around the world, which is what we try to do. We try to analyze news from everywhere. You can see this beautiful, beautiful porcelain body, 15 ounces. Now, the one thing they do in this part of the world is that this is the area of Britain where they make really exceptional ales. Ales are, of course, British beers. Now, I know that in some parts of the world, British beer is an acquired taste. Believe me, it is a taste very well worth acquiring. And these mugs are actually perfect for beer. For that kind of beer, particularly dark ones. I've tried drinking stouts from them, Imperial Russian stout. But as I said, I'm going to experiment with other ones whilst I'm here from this mug. And I'm sure that it will be fantastic because, as I said, stouts work perfectly. And of course, just to show you the other mug that we also have, this is my wife's mug. She wouldn't be parted with it either. She's with me in this part of the world, as, by the way, are my two dogs. We're in the countryside. We're in the depths of the countryside, so we're able to go walk on long walks. But as I said, she wouldn't be without her mug. And you can see here he is, St. George, who's also the patron saint of England, as we know, but he's also the patron saint of Moscow and of Greece. And of course, he stands also for the Duran because he is the Christian warrior fighting for truth, slaying the dragon of false news, which is what we do. And may I add, I have this beautiful shirt. I don't know whether you can see it properly.
We see it. We see the eagle there.
With the eagle there. And this is my long sleeve shirt because the weather has been very changeable here. I mean, it's beautiful weather. So it's actually quite hilly in this part of England. It's not a mountainous country exactly, but this is a part of England where there's quite a lot of mountains. And you can actually go fishing. It's very, very good fishing territory. If any of you have ever read a book by a man called Isaac Walton, which is called The Complete Angler, all about fly fishing, written in 1653. That was the first edition. When I was actually where he used to go fly fishing. And this is perfect for that kind of thing. You walk along the stream with your dogs, at least I have two dogs, and you wear this and you feel utterly comfortable and you get admiring glances from everybody who's walking there. It's a very famous location. I've basically given away my location, Alex.
all the fly fishers.
All the fly fishers, anyway, and followers of Isaac Walton.
That's right.
So they'll be able to figure it out. And as I said, this is exactly the kind of thing you can wear in the country, as I do. The English are very particular about what they wear in the country, by the way, and so they should be. But it also works beautifully in town. And as I said, it's 100% cotton. It's long-sleeved. It's incredibly comfortable. And I cannot recommend it too strongly. The feedback we're getting on our merchandise from our customers is phenomenal. And you can help us, the Duran, by buying from our shop. And you can also help yourself by owning these wonderful things.
Exactly. And today in Athens, we had plus 38, plus 39. Alexander, and I was wearing my black polo with the gold eagle right here, the embroidered gold eagle. And, it kept me cool. That's for sure. All right, guys. Yeah. Also, don't forget you can donate to us on PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar as well. So look for that link down below. That also helps us out a whole lot. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Until next time, everybody. Take care.